Vacations are supposed to start with peace, sunrise, coffee, silence. Mine started with police sirens echoing through pine trees like it was a crime drama. I hadn't even finished half a mug of coffee when 3 patrol vehicles rolled up the gravel path toward my family's lakeside retreat. This cabin wasn't just a getaway. It was my father's dream. A little wooden stone haven tucked into a private valley he'd worked his whole life to secure. And apparently, it was also the epicenter of something petty and ridiculous. Because according to a woman marching toward me like she was leading an invasion, I was a threat to neighborhood order. She came storming down my dock in a neon pink jacket, a tiny designer dog tucked under her arm, waving a clipboard like it was a police badge. Unauthorized wildlife interference. She barked. Section 1, 2, F. You cannot place an unapproved bird feeder in this community. I blinked. A bird feeder. That was the emergency. Morning to you too, I replied. Her ponytail snapped like a whip as she squared up in front of me. My name is Madison Hawley, she announced like I should already know it. President of the Ridgeview Lakes Community Board. Ridgeview Lakes. Cute name, except my land wasn't part of any community. My father bought the entire valley decades ago. Every trail, every tree, every ripple on the lake. This woman didn't know that. Yet, minutes later, red and blue lights flickered across the lake, shattering the quiet morning glow. The officers stepped out, posture stiff, hands near holsters like I was some trespassing lunatic. Sir, we need identification. Certainly, I said calmly. I walked to the steel lockbox mounted on the porch, unlocked it, and pulled out a sealed, certified land deed. When I unfolded it, the Golden County seal caught the morning light. This property, I said, handing it over, is privately owned. Not part of any HOA, not subject to any community rules. The sheriff inspected the papers. Confusion turned to realization. Then something else. The look of a man who just realized he'd been dragged into someone's power fantasy. You own this valley? Asked. All 240 acres, I answered. Water rights included. Behind him, Madison's jaw dropped so fast I thought she might dislocate something. That's impossible. This lake is shared. We have annual meetings, community funds, a charter. No, the sheriff corrected gently, lifting the deed. This area is recorded as privately held land. You don't have jurisdiction here. Madison's face twisted into something caught between disbelief and fury. You can't ignore rules just because you have a piece of paper, she hissed. I smiled. Calm, controlled. It's not just a piece of paper. It's ownership. Her little dog yapped like it was backing her up. She spun around, stumped to her golf cart. Yes, she drove a golf cart down a mountain road to yell about a bird feeder and disappeared up the trail in a cloud of dust and indignation. The officers chuckled lightly, apologized for the disturbance, and drove off. But as quiet settled back over the water, something had changed. The peace wasn't peaceful anymore. It felt charred, like the land itself was waiting. My father always warned me that land draws lines not just in soil, but in people. Some respect boundaries. Others try to redraw them. And Madison Hawley wasn't someone who backed down because of facts or paperwork. She was someone who believed authority belonged to whoever shouted the loudest. I looked out over the lake, the early mist curling over the surface, like a secret whisper. I wasn't leaving. And I sure as hell wasn't surrendering my father's valley to a self-appointed queen with a clipboard, because some battles aren't about rules. They're about roots, and this land had mine. I thought she'd storm off and lick her wounds. Primetawa is wrong. She came back with paperwork, allies, and a plan to take my valley piece by piece. The morning after the police left, the lake looked calm again, too calm. A thin layer of fog drifted over the water like the valley was holding its breath. I boiled water on the stovetop, poured another mug of coffee, and stepped outside with a notebook in hand. Dad used to sit here with this same notebook, sketching trees and writing notes about wildlife and water flow. But today, my notes weren't about nature. They were about Madison Hawley, the self-appointed savior of a community she didn't actually own. She hadn't returned, but trouble as a scent, and the wind was carrying it. By mid-morning, I drove into the nearest town, a quiet strip with a diner, a hardware store, and one real estate office with a fancy, brushed silver sign, Halle and Pines Property Group. Her name was on the building. Figures inside. The receptionist stiffened when I mentioned Madison. "Oh, her," she whispered, lowering her voice like the walls could tattle. "She's enthusiastic." Enthusiastic. That was one way to label a woman who called police over a bird feeder. 5 minutes of polite chat later, I discovered the real truth. The original Lake Association had dissolved years ago. No filings, no charter renewal. Everyone simply lost interest. Madison didn't. She just kept the title, slapped it on letterheads, and crowned herself ruler. People just went along with it. The receptionist sighed. "She's intimidating." Intimidating wasn't the word I'd use. Obsessive fit better. A woman who mistook a clipboard for a crown. As I drove back, a disturbing curiosity gnawed at me. How far would someone like Madison go to keep an illusion alive? I decided to find out. That afternoon, I hiked the southern boundary of my land, following old survey markers buried in moss. Dad had shown me every inch of this valley when I was a kid. Every ridge, every bend in the creek. He'd said, "Land speaks, son. You just need to learn its language." I found the original markers exactly where they should be. Little rusted steel stakes stamped with county numbers. Then I found something new, a shiny post, freshly hammered into the ground, and hanging from it, HOA property. No trespassing. Printed on glossy cardstock. The audacity made me laugh out loud. Madison didn't just believe she ran this valley. She was rearranging borders to prove it. I took pictures, GPS coordinates, and video. Evidence. Dad taught me that too. Don't raise your voice, raise proof. Back at the cabin, I dropped the footage into a folder labeled Valley Defense, Evidence Save File. Paranoid. Maybe. Necessary? Definitely. The next morning, my truck windshield carried a fresh gift, a flyer taped dead center. Notice of violation, unauthorized land use. Fine, $2,500. Signed, M. Halle, Community President. The logo looked like it was designed in Microsoft Paint after 2 cups of wine and arrogance. I didn't rip it off. I took a picture first. Then another note arrived in my mailbox. Same fake letterhead, same threats dressed as rules. I didn't respond. I wanted her to think her paper kingdom was working. 3 days later, a crisp knock echoed on my cabin door. Madison stood there again, sunglasses, clipboard, posture rigid like she'd swallowed a yardstick. "Mr. Lake," she said, tone sweet enough to rot wood, "I'm offering you one final chance to comply voluntarily." I leaned on the doorframe, arms folded. Comply with what? Exactly. With the community guidelines. Primera chuckled. "You don't have a community. You have a printer." Her jaw flexed. Under the sunglasses, I knew her eyes were flaring. "You're disrupting order?" she snapped. "This valley has always been governed." "By who?" I stepped forward ever so slightly. "By whoever actually owns it." Silenza. Her nostrils flared like a stressed racehorse. "This isn't over," she whispered, voice low and sharp. "People here follow structure. They follow me." Primera smiled. "Then they're following a rumor, not authority." She spun around, heels thudding angrily across the porch. Her dog yapped once, like it was saying it for her. I watched her drive off again, golf cart wheels, squealing like she was peeling out of a racetrack instead of a forest trail. And as dust settled and quiet returned, I realized something chilling. She didn't come here to check boundaries. She came to test mine. You don't pick a fight with someone protecting memories and land. But Madison wasn't fighting land. She was fighting reality, and reality never loses. That night, lights flickered near my shoreline, and a reflective drone hovered above the trees, like a silent spy. Madison wasn't backing off. She was escalating. Night in the valley used to feel like a blanket, soft, quiet, protective. Now, it felt like eyes. A day after Madison's porch showdown, the air itself seemed wired with tension. I spent the evening stacking firewood, fixing hinges on the boathouse, doing chores Dad used to do as if normal work could push back whatever storm she was trying to brew. But peace didn't last long. It started as a faint hum, just enough to make the hair on my arms stand up. Then a mechanical buzz drifted over the treetops like an angry hornet dragging a secret. It floated above the lake, silver shell glinting in the dusk, blinking lights cutting through the evening haze. It didn't hover like someone sightseeing. It circled me tight, deliberate, predatory. I lifted my binoculars and locked onto it. And there, stamped just behind the propeller, HOA and Pines Property Group. Of course, she branded her spy camera. Subtlety wasn't Madison's style. I didn't wave or yell. I just watched. Calm, still, because if she wanted a war over dignity and land, I wasn't giving her the dignity of a reaction. The drone hovered one last second, lens pointed directly at my face, then zipped back across the lake. And on the far ridge, under the fading peach sky, I saw her holding binoculars of her own. She wasn't just watching, she wanted me to know she was watching. The power in that moment wasn't hers, though it was mine, because she'd crossed from annoyance to evidence. An evidence. I collect that. The next morning, I drove to the county environmental office. Wood-paneled walls, old tax maps on the walls, and a desk that looked like it had lived 5 careers before this one. Behind it sat a man in a faded Ranger-style shirt. Landon Pierce. 20 years enforcing land regulations. A face that said, "I've seen every flavor of crazy in this county." I laid out the situation. The fake HOA notices. The property tampering. The drone. Landon leaned back, crossed his arms, and let out a slow whistle. "She's playing pretend government," he muttered. "That's dangerous in the wrong hands." I nodded. "She thinks authority is something you can print at home." He tapped his pen. "And she filed 3 environmental complaints against you. All dismissed. One said you are interfering with native bird behavior with your feeder." He smirked. "Guess feeding cardinals is a crime now." When I showed him the boundary-assigned photos, his humor faded. "That," he said, pointing to the GPS data, "is falsifying land use authority. Illegal as hell." Then I played him a short clip of the drone footage. He sat up straighter. "She's filming private land without consent. That's surveillance, violation, territory." He scribbled notes fast, eyes sharp. "Send me every file. I'll start a record." When I left, clouds were gathering over the mountains, thick and gray, the kind that carry weight in the air. The valley looked tense, like it could feel the conflict creeping through the soil. Back home, I set up motion trail cams, 4 of them, infrared, long-range high. I mounted them like sentries around the cabin. Facing the dock, tea tree. Line the ridge path. Dad used to say, "The wilderness sees everything." Now the wilderness had backup lenses. That night, I sat by the fire, flipping through his old journal again. He wrote about tracks, weather shifts, animal paths, but also something deeper. A line caught my eye. Land doesn't need defending until someone tries to own what isn't theirs. I closed the book just as my phone buzzed. Motion detective. West Ridge camera. I opened the feed expecting a deer or fox. But instead, a shape moved through the darkness. A small figure in a hood, scanning the ground with a flashlight. She stepped into a shaft of moonlight, and there she was, Madison Ali, creeping through my property boundary, like she belonged here. Tape dispenser in one hand, another HOA authority sign in the other. She stapled it onto a tree and looked around nervously before moving deeper into my land. She wasn't defending anything. She was building a fantasy in real time. I saved the footage, time-stamped it, filed it in my evidence folder. Not rage. Strategy. If she wanted to escalate, then she'd forget one thing. People who inherit land inherit patience. People who steal authority inherit consequences. And she was walking straight into hers. The next morning, I woke to the sound of voices by my dock, 2 workers in reflective vests, claiming they had a work order from Madison to inspect community shoreline property. She wasn't just trespassing now. She was trying to occupy my land. At sunrise, mist hung over the lake like a silver veil. The valley always looked ancient in that light, untouched, sacred, but peace didn't last. Gravel crunched near the shore, male voices, tools clinking. I stepped onto the porch and scanned the dock. 2 men in orange safety vests were crouched near the edge of my waterline, measuring boards, checking soil depth, marking stakes like they were planning construction. "Morning," I called out, calm but firm. "Can I help you?" One of them straightened up, clipboard in hand. "We're here for the HOA shoreline compliance check, sir," he said. "Work order signed by President Hale. De boldness. De delusion." I walked closer, slow and steady, boots cracking frost underfoot. "This isn't HOA land," I said, voice even. "You're standing on privately owned shoreline." He flipped a page on his clipboard like he was trained for pushback. "Mamse hails it. This area is under review for environmental violations. We're authorized to inspect." "Authorized by who?" I asked. He pointed at the signature box like it carried the weight of the Supreme Court. M. Hale, HOA President. I almost felt bad for them. They weren't criminals, just 2 guys who believed the wrong person with the right tone of confidence. I pulled my phone out and hit record, leveling the camera at their badges. "For the record," I said, "you are on private property without permission. What company are you with?" Their eyes darted. The second guy spoke, voice suddenly unsure. We're subcontracted. We just got a call. Did you verify jurisdiction before arriving?" Silenza. A beat too long. Guilt creeping in. Behind them, the lake glimmered cold and quiet. Even nature seemed to hold its breath. "You've got 30 seconds, I said softly. Not a threat, a boundary. They traded glances, confused, embarrassed, then backed up, grabbed their tape and markers, and hurried to their truck like they suddenly remembered better jobs to be doing. Engine roher, tires spit, gravel, and they vanished down the road. Madison no longer just played queen. She was trying to enforce a kingdom. And kingdoms built on imagination tend to crumble, but only after they try to grow teeth. That afternoon, I took the evidence video, timestamps, GPS pins, and headed to the county government building again. The clerk's sigh was audible the second I mentioned Madison. "You're the 3rd guy she sent inspectors after this month," he muttered while pulling up my file. "Claims she's protecting community standards." "What community?" "Primera, Asked." He rubbed his forehead. "The imaginary one in her head." Apparently, the sheriff's deputy on duty joined us at the counter. A tired smile tugged at his mouth. "She's treating this like a territorial campaign," he said. "I've seen cult leaders with less paperwork." I slid him my documentation, trail cam footage, drone capture, unauthorized personnel report. Add it to her file. More motion lights. Additional cameras, boundary markers freshly updated and flagged. My father used to say, "People don't invade property first. They invade certainty. Protect that, and the land protects itself." That evening, wind whispered through pine branches as I sat on the porch, sharpening a pocket tool, watching twilight settle. Somewhere across the lake, a door slammed, a shadow crossed a lit window in Madison, Isamadan house, pacing back and forth, frantic energy radiating even from a distance. She'd tasted resistance, and instead of backing down, she was spiraling. Night fell heavy. At 1:14 a.m., my phone buzzed. Motion alert, east tree line. I opened the live feed. A hooded figure crouched near my new boundary marker, tool glinting, trying to wrench it out like uprooting proof itself. The floodlight snapped on. She froze. Deer in headlights, caught red-handed, then bolted into the trees. The camera caught her face for half a second. Madison. She wasn't just being stubborn now. She was unraveling. And desperate people don't leave battles undone. They escalate them. By morning, she wasn't hiding anymore. A fresh sign stood at my driveway. Community under investigation, outsider target listed. With my name printed underneath, that valley didn't get quiet. It got hostile, and she was just getting started. Sunlight hit the pines like spilled gold. Birds were chirping. It should have been a calm morning. Instead, I stepped outside and felt my pulse spike. A wooden board nailed square to my gate. Bright red paint dripping like it was slapped on in anger. Community Watch Zone. Suspicious individual identified. The outsider. Report activity immediately. No name, but I didn't need one. Everyone knew who the outsider was supposed to be. My coffee cooled in my hand as I stared at it. Not fear, just disbelief. She wasn't trying to enforce anything anymore. She was trying to exile me like this. Land didn't have my father's signature buried in its roots. I ripped the sign down and tossed it into my truck bed. Wood cracked. Felt good. Somewhere across the lake, a curtain shifted. She was watching. I spent the next hour checking my cameras, and there she was, caught again. 1:47 a.m. Hood up, flashlight, gloves, pulling survey stakes out of the earth like she was peeling stickers off a notebook. This wasn't regulation anymore. It wasn't about property lines or order or lakeside etiquette. This was obsession, a personal crusade. And when a person like that starts losing control, they start trying to take control from everyone else. I sent the footage to the sheriff without ceremony. Just a simple line. She's tampering again. By noon, Deputy Cole rolled up my driveway. Window down, het low. Exhausted smile. "Morning," he said, rubbing his eyes. "Gotcha VO?" "So?" I asked. "So," she denies it again. Says the footage is doctored. Says you're running a smear campaign. He exhaled like the nonsense physically weighed something. "I'm issuing a harassment warning. Official, this time." I nodded. "Good. But warnings don't stop storms." He tapped his notebook. "People like her burn hot and burn out. Just keep documenting. We'll step in when the law hits the threshold." I wasn't sure if that was reassurance or surrender, but I accepted the paper copy he handed me anyway. When Cole drove off, dust trailing behind his cruiser, the valley felt strangely still, quiet, but not peaceful. The kind of quiet where even the birds seemed to pause. Madison hadn't broken yet. She was reloading. I used the downtime. Motion lights upgraded. Cameras synced to cloud backup. No blind spots, no dark corners. Dad always believed land was a living thing, and living things defend themselves. He'd say, "Tonight, the valley would have armor." I didn't have to wait long. 2 nights later, at 12:32 a.m., every floodlight exploded to life. White beams tore through the tree line like dawn had arrived hours early. The motion alert shrieked on my phone. There she was, who'd half fallen, hair wild, breath fogging in the cold night air. A hammer in one fist, a crowbar in the other. She wasn't creeping anymore. She was preparing to destroy something. Her face froze in the harsh light. Shock, then rage, then something darker. Desperation mixed with ego. A cocktail that shatters people from inside. Before I could speak, she bolted into the trees. Branches snapped. Leaves shook. Then silence. I didn't chase her. I just called the sheriff. When the cruisers arrived, sirens slicing through the still forest, the night felt like the first chapter of something heavier. They inspected the damage. Boundary stakes ripped out. One camera smashed. Nails scattered near my observation deck boards. It wasn't vandalism anymore. It was sabotage. Cole walked back to me, flashlight tucked under his arm. "We're filing criminal mischief this time," he said. "She's crossing every line in the book." I nodded. "Told ya? She's not enforcing order. She's trying to erase ownership." He blew air from his nose. "And she's losing. That makes her unpredictable." The deputy wasn't warning me. He was preparing me. People like her don't collapse quietly. They crumble loud, and often they try to pull someone down with them. The sun rose slow and pale the next morning. Wind moved across the lake like exhaled breath. I walked the shoreline, boot prints crunching frost, and thought about something Dad once told me. Some fights aren't about winning. They're about proving who can't be pushed. Well, she pushed, and I was done stepping back. The valley wasn't just land anymore. It was a line, a boundary between truth and delusion, and she had crossed it too many times. Later, that same afternoon, a county officer arrived, responding to another anonymous complaint about a dangerous construction zone. Only this time, he didn't come alone. Someone else followed him up my driveway. And it wasn't Madison. It was someone who claimed to be her legal representative, and they brought paperwork. Real paperwork. The fight was shifting gears. The valley had learned my routines. Morning coffee, check the tree line, scant Lake S. Surface for ripples that didn't belong to fish or wind. It was becoming a habit, a defensive rhythm. By afternoon, the storm had calmed both the real one outside and the one living under my ribs. I was patching the side rail on the dock when I heard tires crunching gravel. Not one vehicle. Two. A White County code enforcement truck pulled up first. Behind it, a polished black SUV that didn't belong in a rural valley unless someone inside wanted to look important. The officer stepped out, clipboard already raised like it was a shield against conflict. Same tired civil servant face I'd seen a dozen times now. Behind him, the SUV door opened and a man emerged. Clean suite, leather, folder, slick hair, smug posture, the kind of person who judged the world by property tax brackets. He walked like he expected applause just for existing. Mr. Alley, it got dead out, scanning the property. It's Roberts, I corrected, and you're standing on private land. He smiled like he practiced it in a mirror. Not warmth, performance. I'm Victor Lane, he announced, legal representative for Ridgeview Lakes Community Association. There it was again, that title she invented like it was a crown. I raised an eyebrow, the HOA that doesn't legally exist. He didn't blink. Your structures near the shoreline are under review. We have concerns about unapproved construction and ecological disruption. The code officer cleared his throat, clearly uncomfortable. This is just a follow-up to a complaint. Standard. Procedure. I crossed my arms. A complaint from Madison? Victor's smile tightened. I'm not here to debate origins. You are advised to comply with community oversight. Primera. La hoakaren. Sharp, like pine snapping in a fire. Community oversight doesn't apply on land I own in full. He opened his folder like he was presenting scripture. She claims your expansion violates shared lacuse policy. I stepped closer. There's no shared anything. The county has confirmed it. Repeatedly, he blinked slowly. Arrogance hiding uncertainty. She maintains governance authority. And I maintain deed authority, I said. Then I turned to the city officer. You already inspected this property. It's compliant, and you dismissed the environmental claim last week. The officer nodded, cheeks flushing. He's right. His permit's cleared. Everything's legal. Victor's jaw flicked the first crack. He wasn't used to resistance rooted. In fact, he tried again. If you refuse voluntary review, we'll escalate formally. I leaned forward just slightly. Not threatening. Who stunkered? Do that. Then explain to a judge why your client files imaginary HOA actions on private land. His confidence wavered a flicker in the eyes. He closed the folder too quickly. We will submit documentation, he muttered. You do that, I replied, voice steady. But next time, come with real jurisdiction. Not cosplay authority. Even the officer smirked at that. Victor spun on his heel, shoes crunching frost, posture stiff as he stalked back to his SUV. He didn't look back. People like him never do when things don't bend their way. The officer lingered, shoulders slumping in relief. For what it's worth, he said quietly. Everyone at the office knows she's unhinged. We're just required to respond." "I get it," I said, "but a storm's coming, and she keeps pouring fuel." He nodded and climbed into his truck. Engines faded, gravel settled, and the valley returned to silence. The kind that doesn't comfort, but loads the air like a boat. Over the next few days, the neighborhood mood shifted, not hostile this time. Curious. People slowed their trucks driving past, pretending to check mailboxes but watching my cabin. Whispers traveled across lake water, faster than wind. Is he really the owner? Did she fake everything? What happens if she loses? The Queen's illusion was cracking. Faith was retreating from her banners. But cornered egos don't retreat gracefully. They break things. Just after dusk, I stood on the deck watching the sun bleed orange behind evergreens when I heard the soft thump of tires. Then, silence. A car without headlights. My phone buzzed motion alert. East camera. A lone figure stepped out near the woods line. Not Madison. Taller, broader shoulders. Hood up. He wasn't holding paper. He was holding something metal. He walked toward my dock, slow, purposeful, like he wasn't sneaking, like he was sent. This wasn't paperwork anymore. This was physical. My jaw tightened. The valley wasn't just being contested now. It was being invaded. I grabbed my flashlight and something else and stepped off the porch to confront him. He didn't run. He just turned his head and smiled, like he knew something I didn't. Then he said 6 words that froze my blood. Madison says this ends tonight. The beam from my flashlight cut through the tree line, slicing shadows apart in thin, white strips. The man didn't flinch, didn't step back, didn't even blink. He stood there like he belonged. Hood up, hands tucked in his jacket pockets, breath steady in the cold. I could see metal glinting beneath the fabric. Tool, weapon. Hard to tell at distance. The lake behind him was a sheet of black glass. Even the frogs and insects seemed to pause, watching. "You're on private property," I called out. Voice calm, evil. He smiled, slow, unsettling. Madison says this ends tonight. He didn't yell it. He spoke it like a man reciting a line from a script someone else handed him, like it wasn't his voice, but hers echoing through his ribs. I stepped closer, boots crunching frost, hand near my hip, not on a weapon, just close enough to signal awareness. Dad always said, control isn't loud, it's steady. Names, I said. You first, he replied calmly. No, I said, voice tightening like winter rope. I asked. His jaw flexed. Something mean flickered behind his eyes. A loyal neighbor, he answered finally. Protecting our community. There it was again. That strange, plural confidence. The cult of her authority. The illusion spreading to others like it had veins. I tilted my head. Community doesn't send people into the night with threats. He chuckled, quiet, humorless. It does when someone threatens the leader. Ah. She wasn't just obsessed. She'd recruited a believer. This wasn't about land anymore. It was about ego, hers, and devotion. His people like that don't arrive without purpose. You planning to do something stupid? I asked softly. He stared for a beat. Then his hand slowly emerged from his pocket, holding not a gun, but a bolt cutter. Not lethal, but powerful enough to sever a chain, a lock or camera wiring. He wasn't here to hurt me. He was here to erase evidence. Remove your boundary markers, he said. Take down your cameras. Pack up. Leave. This isn't your valley anymore. I laughed once, not mocking, just tired. This land belonged to my father before you knew this lake existed. You can believe whatever story you want, he shrugged. But around here, we follow her. A chill ran deeper than the cold air. He believed that, fully. Last chance, he added. Comply, peacefully. I lifted my flashlight a little higher and pointed it at something behind him, the tree line where a small red blink pulsed. The trail cam light flashed, once like a heartbeat in the dark. "You're already recorded," I said. "So here's how tonight goes. You turn around and leave, or you trespass further, and the sheriff sees the rest." His posture faltered. Not broken, but shaken. "You think law protects you out here?" he hissed. "No," I answered. "Truth does." He held my stare for a long moment, breath fogging, jaw grinding, like he wanted to argue with reality, but couldn't quite find footing. Finally, he lowered the cutters. "This isn't over. Tell Madison," I replied, "that pretending to own land Dawson to make it hers, it makes it delusion." His eyes darkened, offense not at me, but at the idea his queen could be doubted. He stepped back into the trees, then stopped, turned, and pointed the bolt cutter like a threat. "She doesn't lose." I shook my head. "She already has." He vanished into the woods, footsteps crackling through dead leaves until they faded, swallowed by the valley. Silence returned, but it wasn't peaceful. It was loading. Like the sky before lightning, like a match head before friction, like the moment in chess when the king realizes he's cornered and starts swinging rooks instead of strategy. I stood alone under pine silhouettes and moonlight and whispered something to the night. This valley keeps its own score. The next morning, I found something pinned to my cabin door, not printed, not typed. A handwritten letter, the ink smudged like it was written, shaking. "Last warning. Leave before sunset," and, below that, a broken trail cam, lens tied with twine, not a threat. A mensaje. And war letters aren't written by people who think they're right. They're written by people terrified. They're losing. The morning air felt heavier than usual, dense, like even the pine needles were bracing. The handwritten threat twisted on my cabin door, strings swaying like a noose. Beneath it, the shattered camera lens glinted like a warning eye. I exhaled slow. Fear wasn't here. Not anymore. This valley was my spine. My blood bat anger, controlled, sharp, cold. Yeah, that was here. I walked inside, set the note on the table, and dialed the sheriff. He picked up on the second ring. "She escalate again. She sent someone last night, and left me this Sant Patos." The letter, the lens, timestamp, stamps, everything. Silence. Then his tone dropped. "All business, no fatigue this time. Stay put. Stay put. We're coming." While I waited, I walked the shoreline. Boots, crunching frost. The lake glimmered soft and innocent, pretending it hadn't witnessed madness in the moonlight. Across the water, Madison's house stood still. Curtains drawn. Lights off, but obsessive people don't sleep after losing control. Tay plot. I felt watched, not fear, but presence, like the land itself was awake, ancient, and aware. Dad used to say, "This place has teeth. You just have to let it bite when necessary." Today, it was going to. 2 sheriff trucks rolled up, gravel spitting under thick tires. Deputy Cole stepped out first. Vest on, jaw set. Another officer followed, laptop bag slung over his shoulder. "You got the message," Cole said. "And the visitor?" I handed over the trail cam footage, the man with the bolt cutter, the confrontation, the retreat. Proof layered on proof. The tech deputy opened his laptop. We traced her harassment files, fake violation notices, and the drone permit request you flagged. His fingers tapped keys fast. "And guess what?" he continued. "She never filed real HOA paperwork. Not with the county, not the state. Everything she's been waving around is self-issued." Cole crossed his arms. "She's impersonating legal authority. That's a felony when it crosses onto private property and involves false enforcement." A weight lifted from my chest. Not relief, not yet, but confirmation. The truth always comes out. Sometimes quiet, sometimes like a thunderclap. Today felt like thunder. They weren't done. We also pulled complaint logs. the tech deputy said, 23 in 3 weeks, all from her. And he turned his laptop around. There she was, Madisonale, arguing with a county clerk in grainy security footage, slamming folders on the counter, waving papers like weapons. No poise and no queen posture, just desperation in pastel clothing. People in line stared. One woman smirked. One man filmed her with his phone. The illusion had cracked. The crown slipped. Reality was catching her by the collar. Cole shut the laptop. We're issuing an immediate criminal summons. And if she interferes today, cuffs. He paused, eyes narrowing at the tree line. And we're visiting her next. We drove across the lake road as one small convoy, gravel spitting, sunlight blazing over frost as if the valley itself wanted to witness the moment. Neighbors peeked through windows, pretending they weren't watching, but eyes followed. Curious, nervous, vindicated. Madison stood outside her home when we arrived. Pink blazer again, jaw tight, eyes wild but glassy. The loyal man from last night lingered behind her like a frightened shadow. Cole approached. Miss Halley, you're being served a criminal summons for falsifying governance documents, harassment, attempted property interference, and unauthorized surveillance. Her face cracked, not shattered, just split enough to reveal the truth beneath. Panique, this is my community, she snapped. He doesn't belong here. He's an invader. I stepped forward, not aggressive, just present. I belong to this valley, I said quietly. You tried to claim a kingdom that wasn't yours. Her voice trembled, ego collapsing in real time. You all followed me, she whispered to her neighbor behind me. You believed me. The neighbor didn't respond, didn't move, just watched her unravel, with sad, tired eyes. That was the real defeat. Not Talau, not the paperwork, the loss of audience. No kingdom survives silence. Cole gave her one last choice. Come to court willingly, or we escort you. Her shoulders sagged. The first honest posture she'd shown. I'll come, she murmured. The loyal follower dropped his gaze too, belief dissolving. The queen had fallen. As they read her rights formally, wind swept across the lake, rippling water like applause from the earth itself. I looked toward my valley, unwavering, ancient, mine, and I whispered, Dad, it held. Not victory. Recognition, roots deeper than arrogance. Madison didn't look back as they led her toward the car. But prometa deed. At the land, te trees, te lake. The valley didn't just belong to me. It defended me, and I would honor that forever. Weeks later, a certified envelope landed in my mailbox. Court date granted. Restraining order approved. Property rights reaffirmed in black ink and seal-stamped gold. And at the bottom, a handwritten note from the sheriff. Some land chooses its owners. Yours chose right. The valley was quiet again. Not tense. Proud. And somewhere beyond the pines, authority myths were crumbling into dust.